protect. My organization is available and more than willing to help implement these changes, as we've offered many times to your staff before. In 2015, a report on trafficking in high schools was published for the Governor's Task Force and found that 1 in 250 high school students in Nebraska are trafficked every single year. So in Lincoln, that means that 164 students are trafficked every single year. So this case is not new. This is not a new problem that we are facing, but now we cannot hide from it. It is not flying under the radar anymore. It is in your face, and this can't be hidden. I would love to help more than anything implement any policy changes, any training, anything that would help this to never happen again. And I would love, I would love to see a lot of change happen. Thank you.
Okay. I have no more cards. That ends public comment. Next is agenda item 8, the consent agenda. Of one conflict of interest to report. Out of abundance of caution, I hereby declare a potential conflict of interest and hereby abstain from voting on agenda item 10.2.1, the Full Service Community Schools Grant Program matter shown in the materials for this meeting. Are there any other items to declare or to be removed? Okay. Laura, would you please call the roll to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
We need to make a motion.
Oh, do we have a motion?
I would move we approve consent items 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3.
Annie?
I'll second it.
Laura, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Srivastava,
Yes.
Ms. Mumgard,
Yes.
Mrs. Danik,
Yes.
Dr. Rauner.
Yes. For first reading, we have item 9.1.1, the 2023-24 Transportation Plan. Liz?
Good evening. My name's Liz Standish. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Business Affairs, and in that role, I do oversee our Transportation Department. Phil Skrupa, our new Director of Transportation, had a family commitment that was beyond his control and could not be here tonight, so I'm going to fill in with the presentation. I am also joined by Jeff Keel. He is here. He is our new Assistant Director. He has not even been on the job 2 months, and so I'm going to do the presentation, but if there's something especially challenging, and I look back at Jeff and he gives me a nod that he thinks he can answer that, then we'll give that a try. Otherwise, this is first reading, and Mr. Skrupa will be back for second reading, so I'll just take notes and take questions and make sure we get any answers out to the board in preparation for that. So I will walk you through the transportation plan for the 23-24 school year. So the mission in transportation is to be the first and last classroom of the day. The idea is we want every bus driver building relationships with students and creating that positive climate, just like we ask our teaching staff in the schools, our school administrators, our paraprofessionals. And I will tell you, in my time down at our transportation department, if you have the opportunity to have a conversation with a driver or para, they just ooze all of this care for the fact that they have the best route with the best students and really take a lot of pride in providing that great environment for students. A few quick statistics. We transported 3,181 students. 30 were regular education. Regular education includes our focus programs, the Career Academy, and that midday transportation. 32, almost a third of the students we transport are special education students. A quarter are early childhood students, and about 7% are English language learners. We drove 1,774,000 route miles through this plan, with about 150,000 for activities and athletics. We had 139 drivers, route drivers, and then we also have trip drivers. We have subs, and then we have drivers that are on a shared route. A shared route is when a driver can do AM and then have a PM counterpart, or they might do week on, week off. So that is an opportunity if they find a pair to have a flexible schedule. We had about 85 paras about 124 routes and 733 runs. When we look at our ridership, focus program ridership averaged about 115 students in the AM and the PM. You can see the breakdown between arts and humanities and the science focus program. And then you could see the Career Academy at about 175 in the morning, about 94 in the midday routes, and 77 in the PM. Ridership remained pretty steady, maybe slightly declined a little bit for early childhood and special education, and ELL ridership averaged about 207 students per day. So this year, every year, we look at the routes and we look to see what are the route additions and what are the route subtractions related to the plan. This also gets advanced to you through the budget process. So you'll notice one of the attachments to this agenda item walks by the line-by-line detail of the routes that are being added and subtracted. So you can see there's about a net increase of $775,000 on that budget proposal. That includes parts and diesel fuel. So the transportation team worked diligently in 22-23. We had a significant driver shortage, both for Lincoln Public Schools and First Student. So during that time, they went through a review of all of our routes and really scaled down our service from 156 to 124. We are currently at about 131. We would like to build back up our staffing level closer to that 115, and I'll share a little bit about that. So the way that we're able to reduce the number of routes is by combining routes. And when we take two routes and combine them and serve them with one driver, the one challenge that emerges is the ride time increases. So as a guideline, it is not a policy, we try to keep ride times at an hour. We have a vast number of routes that are within that guideline, but we do have a few where it would exceed an hour or possibly be an hour and a half. And we know that that can increase late buses, which can impact a child's being at school on time to learn. And we also have staff that is running such tight routes and runs coupled together that we have to prevent from burning out the staff that we currently have as we're trying to build up that staffing level. One concern I have that I want to make sure we know that we didn't experience last year that I was concerned about is by having these really tight turnarounds to maximize our staff, we do lose some of that cushion for inclement weather. We did not have a lot of inclement weather last year, so we did not have that experience as much, but I am concerned if we have like a few weeks where the streets are just a little bit sloppy, but we're still in school, there could be delay in bus runs just because we are losing some of that room in between routes where we would have then not been late. Looking at our driver staffing, the root challenge of our route structure is driver staffing. We would be about 30 drivers short of that ideal staffing, getting back up to that 150 range. We're currently 11 drivers short from what would be our consolidated staffing plan. Our First Student contract allows for about 20 drivers. They have currently committed to 8 drivers, and they're working to add to that number. So as you can see, we're close to where we need to be. I am amazed each and every day when I'm at transportation, what they do based on absences, based on the workload that day to reroute literally on the fly buses so that we can make things work and accommodate students, and the flexibility of the staff there. You just have to have that mindset in order to work in that environment, and they do an amazing job. We have a fleet about 109 buses that are that size 27 to 53 and 49 of the 54 to 84 passenger buses. Our fleet age is around 12 years. I would say that's very close to the industry average. That's not necessarily out of whack. The one challenge that is impacting our fleet right now is we've ordered buses, we've had funding for buses, but they are just taking a very long time to get here, and we're having trouble buying school buses. So that's the challenge right now. We do have a policy related to transportation eligibility. Elementary and middle school students residing more than 4 miles away, that is defined by state statute, and we do align our transportation plan with state statute. Students in special education where the IEP is required as a part, transportation is required as a part of their IEP, or if we've made some changes and relocated some areas of our district to balance out school enrollment. We have a couple routes related to that. So for 23-24, I talked about how we review each line of the transportation plan. And so, for example, opening new schools, as you recall from the budget work session in June, we did add 2 routes. We did add 1 additional route for special education, and I'm struggling with the A&E acronym. I'm going to let Jeff think about it.
Arts and education.
Okay. The focus program?
Yep.
Okay.
IASD.
Independence Academy. Perfect. Thank you. Lakeview Elementary added 1 regular route and additional EL routes at Adams, Rousseau, Everett, and Meadow Lane. And then we did increase costs to cover rising fuel. So like I said, there's a 1-page handout that's attached to this plan that talks about all of those budget changes. And then there's also a lengthy handout where you actually have copies of all the various runs and where they go. But that is part of the formal process of filing the transportation plan. We have done significant work this summer related to training on safety and security, but that's actually the policy that's the next agenda item. So I'll cover that topic on the next agenda item. But right now I would be ready to answer any questions as best I could on the transportation plan.
Any discussion?
No, she already answered.
Okay. Yeah, speaking from the planning committee, I was surprised at the scale. It always amazes me how large our bus driving staff is larger than the full staff of some small school districts. But for those who say, could you cut this? The answer is no. Most of it's required by state statute, so we have to do it, right? So.
Yep. That's also an important note. We did review this at the planning committee.
Yeah.
You bet.
So, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but the very first one of the things you said was that is it possible, did I hear this right? Possible that if we cannot bring our drivers up, that an hour ride could become hour-and-a-half rides?
Yes, if we're having combining routes.
Combining
So
routes.
you could have that circumstance this next fall in the district where the ride times are quite lengthy, hour 15, hour 20. That would not be the norm. That would not be our practice, but we could be combining a few routes just based on short staffing. The very tough alternative to that is double routing it, which then means whoever's on the second route gets to school an hour late, and we can't have that either. So to really try and get students to school on time so they can be in class learning, we do increase the ride times when we have to.
Does a family have an alternative? We don't have alternatives to that, do we? I mean, like if you find that your kid is going to be an hour and a half, we don't. That's not, I mean, we're just doing the best we can to find the drivers to make the buses happen.
Yeah, the only alternative would be if the family's capable of transporting themselves. And then we do ask them to let our transportation department know, because then we might be able to make that route a little bit more efficient. So they would get their bus stop time, and if they're just not comfortable with that bus stop time, the only other alternative for a family would be to transport themselves. We are really doing the best we can with the staff we have.
That I know. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to me that we always get the routes, and it's about this thick, and it's like, I don't know who knows how to read this, but that is a skill. When do we have an idea of when we will have the best idea possible of how the buses are going to work to be able to inform families? So that, it would be a bummer if it came as a surprise versus, okay, this is something we can plan and work with.
Jeff, do you know when the communication goes out to families on their stop pickup time or things like that? I would imagine it's early August because we have to get through when's route sign up?
Before school starts, route sign-ups July 31st and August 1st.
Okay. Yeah.
For the drivers.
Okay, so the transportation staff has route sign up where drivers come in and select their routes, and there's a process for that that's actually negotiated. And then in response to that, based on what drivers we have, then it would be family communications. So I know you and I both often think as a place from a mom, you could be learning this on August 8th or August 10th
Right.
as far as your stop time. I would say there is a lot of consistency of routes and runs across the city. It's not a revamp every year, so it could be that your experience is very similar to the prior year's experience unless you're changing schools or changing grade levels, things like that.
Okay, great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Kathy?
I just have one question. I've gone through the run summary report, I've gone through the presentations. This doesn't include anything before and after school. This is only during the school day, correct?
Correct. Yep, because
So-
then trips would be scheduled on top of that.
So our transportation drivers are also taking care of extracurricular activities, correct?
Correct.
And
Yes.
And they're compensated for that,
Correct. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, and that a lot of times couples together for a very lengthy day. We do have a lot of our transportation staff working overtime, working very hard to help transport students, and we greatly appreciate that.
I just wanted to say a great big thank you. I know that I have grandchildren that have experienced that, the great drivers that we have, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah.
This item will come back to us at our next meeting. And next is item 9.1.2, Policy 3770, LPS Safe Pupil Transportation Plan.
You bet. This is really exciting. We have had conversations about additional training. We've had staff seeking additional training in the area of safety in our transportation department for a while. And so we really have been thinking about how to approach that, how to build capacity for it. We've always had Board Policy 3770, but this summer we had the opportunity, and Jeff was very instrumental in this process. And with our security team, you had Kyle Poor up here earlier, we are going to be rolling out a plain language standard response protocol for a school bus, which honestly, this does not surprise you, Lincoln Public Schools does this all the time, does not exist. And so we're creating it, and we're having great conversations about what does that emergency response look like on a school bus. So through that work, we've built capacity the last couple of years. This concern really was brought forward when we had an input session with drivers back in '21. As you remember, one of the highest and first priorities we had to pursue was a difference in pay because drivers were going to the private sector. Through that work, we also realized we needed to build capacity. The capacity building included adding an additional trainer to our training team. I've been able to spend some time with our training team this summer, and they are fabulous. We have some great people that are working hard, and we also needed to add more training time. So through negotiations the following year, we were then able to have a day coming up here in August where bus drivers will spend the day going through protocols with hands-on training in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we're going to do training related to medical emergencies, emergency responses, lots of really great work. So as we were developing that work, and as the team, not really we, me, them. As the team was developing all of that, we identified, Jeff actually identified that we should make some changes to policy. And what you'll notice is we're just creating it more flexible. So we're adopting the same logic that we use in schools, which is flexible thinking. So the bus driver, based on what they know, based on what their experience is going to need to make some decisions. The red line versions here, you could see we talk about what to do in case of a weapon. We talk about there could be an alternative of evacuating the bus, leaving the weapon on the bus, moving the students away from the weapon. So some tough conversations, but this is what we did a couple years ago with our standard response protocol in schools, and we really needed to do this on our buses. We also have always had a process where a driver calls dispatch to call 911. We are also opening the door that the driver may initiate a direct 911 call if they choose from their cell phone, like on speakerphone. We want them to always open the line of communication with dispatch. We want to know where they are. We want to know that their next step is calling 911. But we want to empower them that if they're in a medical emergency and they feel they would be best advised by the medical response as being the person with the person experiencing the emergency, if they feel comfortable and have a cell phone, they are able to do that. Otherwise, dispatch is there, just like they've always been. They'll get emergency on the way. So if you look and turn the page to the next section, you can see it's very similar. We're giving drivers more choices. I will say that Phil Skrupa described this very well to planning. At the end of the day, the team realized the bus could do one or two things. It could go or it could stop. So the protocols mean go to, like if you need to go to a safe location, or you're going to stop because you're navigating at the safest first stop, a medical event. And so kind of when we talk about lockdown, lockout, some of the things schools do, we're going to have a go protocol, we're going to have a stop protocol, and then the people on the bus can really do two things. They can stay on or they can get off. And so with using those very simple directions, just like we do in schools, we think we're going to build a lot of capacity with our staff to feel much more empowered, much more confident that they have the resources to navigate information. So you can see the driver may choose to evacuate the bus. You could see the direct calls to 911, the reference to the annual training, and we know it'll be a work in progress. We didn't want to get bogged down in scenarios and what ifs. We want to make progress. So this will be a big step forward this fall. We're excited about it, but we know there'll still be work to do and some fine tuning, or maybe we'll have come up with something that doesn't quite work out in the field because we are the first, and we'll have to make adjustments, and we're committed to doing that. So we're excited to bring this policy forward to you, and we're excited for the training that's about ready to occur in just a few weeks for the start of school.
Kathy?
I have a couple questions. So I know what dispatch is because I used to work for the sheriff in another lifetime. So can you explain for people who don't know what dispatch is, what that is, so they know that when they are trying to get help, who is getting that call?
Yep. Yep, so we have a radio system on our buses that are connected to dispatch that has a radio, and so a bus would radio to our dispatch. It's hard to call it a center, it's a room. It's a rather small room that two people sit in. I would say Jeff spends mornings there quite frequently as he gets his day started. And so buses are contacting dispatch with questions, we're giving feedback. And so the first thing we do want buses to do is to call into dispatch, give their bus number, give their location, give the event, and then they can maybe make some choices on how to navigate that event.
So if multiple people are on a radio call to dispatch center and there's an emergency, is there, and I don't need to see it in writing, I just want to know that there is there a way they can give information over the radio in an expeditious fashion so that they know they can move to the front of the line if there's a way that they need help?
Yeah, so you're hitting on something that is a work in progress for us.
Yep.
I would say we've had fairly informal communication protocols on the radio, and we are looking at, we are going to get through this round of training, kind of establishing the baseline. We do want to look at our radio protocols, if we want to use any potential code system. That is kind of the next layer the training team is going to look at. So you have identified something we need to keep working on, but the vision is there. The goal is to accomplish what you're seeking.
It's one of the things I remember when I worked for the sheriff's office. When someone had an emergency, they had a very specific code, and they would say code whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I was concerned about that. And last, I didn't see paras mentioned in this policy, and they may or may not be on the bus. So do we need to consider adding something about paras' responsibility, or did I miss it?
I do believe it's because at this point, the driver really is the lead in that moment of emergency, and we don't have paras on every bus. So I think the policy is meant as directional for the driver. One, because we have a driver on every bus. And two, in that moment, we could think about, Mrs. Danek, if there is something where the driver is, not able to be the person that's directing, what the direction to the para would be. So let me think about that one a little bit
Because
more.
if a driver had a medical episode,
Right, then the para
they
would
might need someone
Yep.
to call
Yep.
for help.
Yep, and the paras are receiving the same training as the drivers, so they will be at the training. But we may want to, between now and second reading, take a look at this policy to see if we want to mention paras somewhere, because they are a critical part of the team. And there could be a situation where a para does need to take charge. So I think that's a good point.
It might be regulation instead of policy too, so.
Well, we'll take a look at it. Yeah, we actually have a
appreciate
meeting
it.
tomorrow morning, so.
Perfect, thank you. Otherwise, it's a great policy. I really think it's very well detailed.
Yeah, Yeah, we're moving forward. We're not going to be perfect yet, but we're moving forward.
I was just going to ask about paras as well, so that I would, if nothing else, at this point, are they getting the training? Same
Yes.
training, and yes. But I was
Yes.
thinking the same thing, the paras, where are they in the picture?
Yep, they're in all of the same training that the drivers are going to receive on Monday. Yep.
Fabulous.
Okay. Yeah, and on behalf of the planning committee, it was a very interesting discussion, and so Jeff and Phil, congrats, because this was very interesting, just learning all the stuff that goes behind all this that a lot of people just don't really think about, so.
Yep, we're excited. We've built some capacity with our leadership team and our training team, and we're looking forward to good things ahead, and that will hopefully help us with our recruitment and retention of drivers. So that's what we're looking forward to.
Okay. So
And
item-
Paris, we need Paris too.
Yeah. This item will come back to us at our next meeting. Next is agenda item 9.1.3, newly annexed property to the city of Lincoln.